Thank you so much. Do I need to continue? Yes. I will be close to the arrow. I have a lot of animations, so that's why I'm head and that. Hello, everyone. I'm Duygu Dikicioglu. Like Steffi, I'm an associate professor in the department. My role is primarily focused around digitalization. So I thought I would give it a name that would be closely aligned with that. And I called it the random walk because random walk is a kind of like a machine learning based process where you actually the best way of describing is done through the actually this guy is very famous in machine learning. He's the drunken dunker. Like he's literally called that. So it's the random walk process is kind of imitated by this person's walking back home from the pub. So a little bit of a forward, a little bit of a backward. You never know what the next step will look like, and then you take some steps and eventually end up somewhere, or you don't end up somewhere. So my decisions up to this point have been kind of resembling that. That's why I selected particularly this name. But they are not like the jittery like this one, the Brownian motion version. So it's a little bit less hectic, I would say, but still not really very structured, very planned. I didn't have too much of a strategy, as you will see along the way. So this is the outline of what I'm going to talk about. Slightly different from what you would like to see, perhaps, or slightly different from Steffi, which will be extremely difficult to follow, but I mean, to match, unmatchable. But I will try to keep the bio part a little bit brief. And then I thought since we are organizing this event in order to celebrate the women's presence in STEM, so I thought I might be kind of getting into discussions about women in STEM, and then let's not forget men. So I thought, why not? Let's discuss men in STEM as well. And I will wrap it up with something, hopefully, if you're not asleep completely by that time, will make sense. So, okay, before we start, this is my disclaimer. So, everything I say is going to be my opinions, my facts. So, if you don't like it, just say that, okay, she has said something stupid. If you like it, I will accept it on behalf of all women. Okay, so first things first. What on earth is this name, right? Everybody who sees it for the first time thinks that. How do we pronounce it? How do we say it? And usually it's the same for anyone who joined my group as well. So I have a dedicated Teams for I have a dedicated audio file along with the phonetics of how to pronounce my name. So probably not all supervisors would have something like that, but I do. Surprise. I have to. I'm Turkish. I come from this part of the world. I'm from Istanbul, so it's quite north. This is how the city looks like. Now, Steffi told you about actually what the single most important take-home message from her slides would look like. This is the most important message that I would like to give. So, Istanbul has something called the Bosphorus. It's not a river, it's not an estuary, it's just a waterway connecting the Mediterranean to the Black Sea. So, if there's only one take-home message, a commonly made mistake, calling it a river, not a river, it's a waterway. So, I come from the city, 15 million, very crowded, born there, grew up there, and lived most of my life there, still counting the years in the UK. So this is what happened with me. I will not start with like very childhood images, perhaps, but I will start with high school. And there's only one particular reason that I actually selected this. This is my high school. And as you can see, there's a portico there. So I kind of find it poetic that I ended up in another place that has a portico at the end after moving around. So I just wanted to share that with you. So this is where I studied my university. The blue thing, not a river, Bosphorus. Okay? So this is the university that I studied in. It's slightly newer than UCL. It's approximately 40 years younger. So it's actually, I started with chemical engineering. I did all my master's and PhD there, and it's kind of like slightly different from the system in the UK. It's more, if you're familiar with it, it's more aligned with the system in the US, the education system. So it's like a 4-year undergraduate, 2 years master's, 4 to 6 years PhD. So it's like quite a bit of a journey you take until you get the PhD title. It's slightly different. And I've studied all through chemical engineering in all these degrees. And from my 4th year, so my final year in my undergraduate onwards, I started focusing more and more on the biochemical engineering specialization option. So I got involved in those aspects more heavily than anything else. And primarily during my PhD, I focused a lot on systems biology. So my lab was big on systems biology. They were involved with several different projects, European projects as well, who were actually the participants, other participants from all across Europe were actually the landmark people who were like the key people for systems biology and particularly yeast systems biology. So I got quite a bit of an interaction there. And during my PhD or my undergraduate, maybe this will be the upsetting thing. When I say I studied there, I didn't actually study there. I spent my 12 years here. So, of course, there was an alternative campus, and whenever you're an engineer, you're in the ugly part of the world. So, it's this part of the building that we were studying in. And for 12 years, I was stuck there. Anyway, on a sweet note. I actually, during my PhD, I had a co-supervisor who was based in the UK. So I was going back and forth between Manchester and Istanbul quite a bit. So I was spending some time over there. I was trying to basically find my way around in both labs at the same time. And then it was a long journey, but I was about to finish my PhD. Actually, on the day of my Viva, we don't call it the Viva, we call it the defense. It's a public event. During that time, after my Viva, the first thing I've heard was this secondary supervisor telling me, I've got a project approved. Would you like to be a postdoc? And by that time, towards the end of my PhD, the supervisor was in Manchester, moved to Cambridge. So I ended up at the University of Cambridge as the next thing. So this is again their advertising slides that shows Cambridge. And I was actually in this building on Tennis Court Road again. And the most beautiful thing about Cambridge is Tennis Court Road, trust me. I actually started working in this building first, and then moved on to the even uglier new one. So, unfortunately, this is how I ended up with. But again, very similar to Steffi's case. It was a biochemistry department. It's a very well-known biochemistry department, probably one of the, except for the medical school, it could be the most largest department at Cambridge, actually. That's a very interesting place. So you walk into the reception. The first thing you see is 6 photos of individuals who got the Nobel Prize from the department. A single department in a single university. So very competitive, very, very different environment. Very different environment from what you will see here as well, in terms of people working very uniquely on their own, very isolated groups, even within the same group, having challenges across individuals, and the PI trying to manage or not bothering to manage these challenges. So it was a different environment. And just like Steffi mentioned, again, one thing that was super prominent was the fact that there was only one female professor in this largest department of the university. And everybody else was male, in total up to 95% in the permanent positions. That include also the PIs who are not academics, but among everyone, it was primarily male dominant, heavily male dominant. And yeah, this was the environment essentially that I was working in. Now, from systems biology, my project that I was hired to work at was again an EU project, surprisingly, but it was more about again working with yeast systems, but this time bioprocessing became more of an important aspect to the questions that we were trying to answer. So I started transitioning into bioprocess related questions only, or rather, I was still using the skills that I have gained through systems biology, perhaps, but then the type of questions that or the type of problems, application areas that I was interested in was shifting slightly towards more application rather than understanding how the cell was operating, for example. So this was kind of the change. And towards the end of my fellowship, actually, so maybe I should go over this and then I have some more activity going on after the brief timeline. So again, I stayed in Cambridge, and just like Steffi, I got my own Lieberman Trust Fellowship. So I had this advantage. I was working on a computational project. I was completely independent. I didn't need a lab. I was like a self-standing individual with my own research funding that was sufficient for me. And I was like a self-enclosed entity in a way. Well, apart from what you will end up doing in the future, best 3 years of my life, I would say, because like you propose a project to do something and then you go about and do that, and it's not like you only report to yourself and you only actually are responsible for what you have devised or proposed to do. So it's, I think, fellowship is a really exciting time in terms of research. I was in another department though. I was really not too happy about biochemistry, so I moved on back home, chemical engineering, and ended up there. And my project there was primarily, again, I think I switched back to kind of a little bit more on systems biology, metabolic pathways, metabolic pathway analysis, metabolic modeling, and I focused primarily on microbial communities. I was focusing on wine producing communities. That's our resident from grade school. So I spent at CEPI 3 years in that project doing my own thing, and before I moved to UCL. Now, before UCL, so this is the lucky part about my talk. At the time that I got the fellowship, they just finished their wonderful building and moved to a new flashy place. This was the first time that actually I worked in a decent environment that wasn't like literally breaking down as you work through it. So that was quite cool. I mean, it did have its own problems, but most of them are handled before I made the move there. So I worked in a really, this time I hit the jackpot in terms of like the working office scenario. That was quite fun. So during this process, I had, as Steffi mentioned, I mean, I had gotten in contact with or gotten in touch with different people throughout my life. And actually, so when I was doing my undergraduate, so perhaps this is not something that you would associate heavily with Turkey, but in chemical engineering, 60% or above of all the professors were female. So I had extremely high, like very strong female representation, and like your models would be them. And my PhD supervisor, my principal PhD supervisor was also uh, a female, and like she had strong connections with different departments all over Europe and US. So, I mean, I had a very strong like cohort of PhD students and postdocs in the same lab who were all female as well. So we had our own integral support group, and everyone we were basically aspiring for were almost female. So I never thought actually of these issues before moving to the UK. And then, as I mentioned, I moved to a department where more than 95% of all the PIs were male. Then it started kind of dawning upon me that not every part of the world or not every mechanism is similar. There, so two people that I actually want to specifically mention. This one single female professor, I held on to her for life as a mentor, obviously, because she made it. I mean, in such a competitive, such a rigorous environment, she's one of the rare people who managed. And also, she had a very interesting and non-ordinary or non-typical career path that led to professorship. And I mean, she was always very open about it. She was very supportive of females in science and STEM in general. And I mean, she's really like a super pleasant person as well. So I mean, um I don't think I was the person to nudge her all the time with requests or with advice or with things like that. But uh, during some key decisions in my life, I knew that there was always this person, this kind of person that I consider as a landmark that I would turn back to and ask for advice. So, in that sense, I feel myself quite lucky to be actually in touch with someone like that at that point in my career. The other person I would like to mention is actually my boss, my former secondary supervisor, and was my boss there. Um, we didn't really have a mentorship type of a relationship, not perhaps as close as Steffi described. But one thing that was actually quite interesting was that if it weren't for him, I would have never applied for the fellowship because I always kept thinking to myself, I'm not ready, it's not the time. And you kind of get into a circle of not being sure about yourself because so this also has a departmental effect as well. As I mentioned, there was a reason when I mentioned that there are six Nobel laureates photos at the reception. Uh, I was from that building when I moved into that building had the Stem Cell Research Institute people in it. In that institute, um, it's basically live or die kind of a situation. And the way that they define academic life or living in academic terms is publishing in Nature or Cell. I'm not saying nature something, nature or cell, not cell metabolism, cell blah blah. It's basically for you to survive. It's either you publish in one of these journals during your postdoc, or that nothing will become of you. So you're going to work in industry in a company, in a biotech company. So this is the environment that I was in. If you're constantly exposed to discussions like this, if you're constantly exposed to people being as ambitious as these people, and like for example, I mean, I've learned about scooping there. I've learned about the term there. So essentially, they compete with other labs all around the world, and like they essentially end up getting scooped halfway through their project because all the labs are working on the same thing, and someone publishes first. So you end up with like getting exposed to very different experiences, and very different experiences that you have kind of reflect on you in a different way. That's why I got into the loop of thinking like, I'm an engineer. I mean, I'm publishing like the highest impact factor I published during my postdoc years is like 6.7 or some like impact factor 6.7, and it's literally non-existent as far as these nature cell people are concerned. So it was kind of like it was getting into a different context. Like you start evaluating yourself not in your own context but in another context as well, which kind of actually was. That's why I want to specifically highlight this individual who was actually my boss at that time, because unless somebody pushed me into, okay, now it's time, you need to write up and you need to go for your own fellowship, I would have never done so on my own. And he was there at the right time to say that. And this is kind of, and also he gave me the opportunity and the flexibility. So he told me about this at the end of my 4-year position, but then he found some money for me to stay on until basically when I wrote the fellowship, I needed to have, it's already as well, so it takes about a year or so for me to start. So I actually had the opportunity to work on another toy project of his, and at the same time focus on basically waiting for the results. So he gave me that opportunity and provided the necessary means for it as well, in that sense. So that's another thing. And here at chemical engineering, it was a completely different situation. So I ended up in a place where there were more females, and which was refreshing again as well. After actually biochemistry, it was quite refreshing as well. And I had collaborated with female colleagues. I had a strong group of female friends, whom I would like to call as friends, actually, not postdocs. At the department or not fellows at the department, but working in different roles in different projects. But there was a mechanism of support again. So, in addition to that, I was extremely lucky because I experienced a situation probably not very many people would encounter. I didn't look for a mentor, but someone from the department actually approached me and said, I would like to be your mentor. So this is something quite extraordinary as far as mentorship is concerned, because for the mentors, it's always like some additional work you take on. It's typically people don't do something so extraordinary. So I would be forever grateful for that individual, of course, for providing me guidance. It wasn't necessarily that I was following everything that he was telling me. It wasn't necessarily the fact that I was actually agreeing with many things that actually he was proposing, but it's always good to have someone to bounce back ideas from. Regardless of whether you agree or not, that's another thing. And so this is my before. And then, so actually, when I applied to UCL, it was over 6 months left in my fellowship. So I knew that I got the job, but then I had the opportunity because I was given the flexibility to be able to complete the fellowship and then start here. Now, I'm not entirely sure whether it was a curse or a blessing, because my start date for this job was 1st of April 2020. Does that ring a bell in terms of COVID? So it wasn't the best of times to start a new job as an academic, I would say. It was lucky that actually, because I was doing my own fellowship and I knew that actually I would be starting here for the past few months. I have been basically commuting back and forth, spending some couple of days here and a couple of days back in Cambridge. So I got to know people, I got to meet people, luckily, before everybody went their own ways and got isolated in their own homes. So that was the lucky part, as far as things were concerned. But then I started working at UCL. So before I start working, I start talking about that, perhaps the thing that I think should make all of us very proud. So we recently got awarded the Athena Swan Gold. So, it's always a way of being proud of. Actually, I'm telling you how proud we are to be working in such a supportive environment, and I think it's a testament of this fact. So, in any presentation, I would definitely proudly wear the badge, shall we say? So, this is something I think, especially in terms of like what it means to be in this month, in this particular month, and talking about STEM-related subjects, I think it becomes more and more important to rethink about where we are and how lucky we are to be doing the things that we are doing. So, what do I do? This is the next question, because like digitalization was a very rounded, like very closed thing for me to work on. And over the course of time, the definition of what was entailed within that single word expanded quite a bit. I started working. I initially thought it was primarily going to be data analysis, modeling, and related issues. Then it kind of expanded into incorporating automation, data structuring, storage at times. So it expanded into it expanded, let's say, my horizons as well in terms of what a role in digitalization in an academic environment would entail. So now I'm involved in quite a few different things, perhaps, but overall, it's only for COVID, so there's nothing to read there. But all in all, what I'm interested in, understanding, achieving some level of high level of understanding of the cell and high level understanding of the bioprocess, and the marrying them together in order to make the processes work more efficiently, make the products be of higher quality, and any sort of tool that falls under that category, especially in the domain of modeling or digitalization, is of interest to me. So this is what I'm particularly interested in. And one other thing that I actually even that came up from my interview was that I wanted to carry on working because I was working already with microbial communities. I wanted to carry on working with them. So I'm still doing some work with microbial communities. And I have kind of transitioned from natural communities into more tailored synthetic ones. Now I'm revisiting back the natural communities because there's some sort of venue for us to do so. And this is something that's like a pet project for me. I will keep go looking into that forever. So that's something that is not immediately perhaps process ready at the moment, but I see quite a bit of interesting insights in it that could in the future become quite interesting for us. So apart from all these research roles that I'm carrying out, actually I kind of over the course of the past few years, being handed actually the initial task from Steffi, being the study abroad and affiliate tutor and expanding on the subject, I ended up finding myself a lot more involved in global engagement of any sort. So actually, if you have any sort of global engagement related issues or tasks or questions, I'm the person in the department that you might provide you with some wider background and point you in the direction of the people who know the best about what you're asking. So I ended up having kind of like this additional role of like being heavily involved in global engagement related things as well. So this is what I do as a summary. Now, this brings me to, again, to revisit the concept of women in STEM. So I wanted to have kind of like an oversight of what I would think. This now is the part that will actually be relevant with the disclaimer. So completely my own opinions and ideas and thoughts. We're all working in STEM, women, men, like all of us. And I think it's, for all of us, it's a bumpy road. And it's not like it's easy for some people and difficult for other people. I don't necessarily agree for that fact. I think it's a bumpy road for all of us. Sometimes, due to different circumstances and situations, women might feel the bumps more prominently, let's say. It might be the case that sometimes they are facing challenges that might be rendering them to basically do a bit of more work around things. This is unfortunately the way things are at the moment. At least the way that I see it. And what I actually try to emphasize, you're trying to, okay, this is the Forgetful False support group. Hello, my name is Ken. I'm forgetful. Hi, Larry. So, now, okay, not perhaps as useful as this, but I find that, at least from what I experienced and what I experienced from strong female, strong successful females around me, what I have experienced so far is that, in addition to a mentor, I think females thrive on support relationships, support groups, and support relationships. So it doesn't necessarily need to be like, oh, we're all friends kind of situation. It doesn't necessarily need to be like colleagues, although, like in the department, we are, as Steffi mentioned, I think extremely lucky in that sense. And that will be extraordinary for any other place. I think it's not something that needs to be taken granted for, like looking into the future for any of you. But um, I think no matter what the situation, a support group is very important. I think someone really benefits from having a group of people who will be, you see these memes on Instagram, and somebody says, "Okay, I'm going to kill this person. Okay, where do we meet?" Like they will be like watching your back, supporting you no matter what you do, etc. You need a group of people like that, and you also need a group who will slap you in the face. So it's not only one thing. Like you need support in order to maintain your sanity in the short term, but the ones that slap you in the face whenever it is needed are needed for long-term goals, I think, because and in the first instance you hear that you don't like it, you don't enjoy having your mistakes or like what could have been done instead of what you have done to be like said told back straight to your face. It might not be the best option that you have out there, but you end up in a situation benefiting from hearing that harsh truth or being faced with that harsh truth as well. So, in my opinion, I think you need both groups at the same time. The only thing that matters is that, so you might hear it in other places as well. Sometimes it's not done in the best of intentions. So you need to always make sure that the person who is slapping you in the face is slapping you for the right reasons. I know it sounds awkward, but you ladies know what I mean, right? So um, it's always a good idea to end up in a situation where you can rely on the ideas or the views of who is surrounding you, and I think it's a great thing to have. It will save you Prozac. Tell me about that, and it will save you therapy. So it will be always a good addition to your life. That would be my foremost recommendation. Now, I have this mixed pot because I think this is what we are dealing with every day in our lives. So, um, in the department, we have a super supportive group, and I would. I think I'm proud to say that we don't have this as a massive problem in the department where we need to emphasize something about women in STEM to basically support them to the extent that will be needed in other places, let's say. But from this point moving forward, you might end up in places, or you might find yourself in situations, even when you're here, when you're interacting with non-departmental people, you might end up finding yourself in a group of people with mixed experiences, mixed backgrounds, and this would mean that you end up in finding yourself in situations where perhaps you're not even aware of who is actually saying what, or like what sort of a comment will come from which direction. So you might find yourself quite unaware because we're in a safe zone, so we let our guards down in a way. And then you might all of a sudden end up in a situation where you're not even aware of where you find yourself. And so this is something that we all need to be, I think, more wary about whenever, especially when we're interacting with new people. So if something's going to happen, anyone who was friends will not understand what I mean by this. It's not going to be that out there anymore. Okay, so it will not be like if there's something annoying you, it's not going to be like this. Like, I mean, we live in a part of the world where certain things are taken care of in terms of regulations, laws, etc., etc. So if you find yourself being in a difficult position because you're a woman, it will probably be through micro events. And at times you might even consider yourself asking yourself, like, did this really happen or not? Because most of the time it might not be even intentionally done or done in a way that actually the person acting on it might not be aware of. So it might not be with the bad intentions, but you might end up finding yourself in a situation like that. And sometimes it could even be the case that perhaps it's not even a thing on its own, but if you end up on a single day, you have 10 of those things, they accumulate. So you, so it's, I think these kind of instances are quite important to think about as well. And they do exist. So there's not much to do, I think, about that, or there's no need to, I think, to think about and basically focus on them so as to lose your future foresight. Not dwelling on them, I think, is the best thing that we can do. And in that sense, we're all role models, in my opinion. So not us, all of us, because we made it in STEM, right? I'm thinking about the women in the room yet, not men. Sorry about that. We'll be there shortly. So we're all role models, but it's not necessary. It doesn't necessarily mean that we need to act as a role model. It's not. It's nothing like that. Like we do our thing, and at the same time, somebody's looking up to you because you're having your PhD. You have done your PhD. So when you go and speak in a school, for example, you're a role model for them, not even being aware of it. So any sort of action that you take ends up being a message for the people around you without you being aware of it, which is in a way kind of great because if we have the right attitude, I feel that or I think that this can actually communicate quite nicely to everyone else and we can be role models without even thinking about being them. So, for example, if you run into problems, there's no way of dwelling on the problems a lot. Just walk around them. That's an easier way. Like move forward with your thing without dwelling too much into like oh this problem exists, what am I going to do or so. So moving along is I think the best thing and being constructive about everything and being like a solution oriented person, problem solving rather than dwelling too much on the problem or the nature of the problem itself actually turns out to be more effective, at least the way that I found it turns out to be more effective in terms of the long-term goals that you would like to achieve. Now, this brings me to menace. So, I actually wanted to search for a graphical image that says female mentor for male and a cartoon. Ended up with nothing in Google. I think it says a lot. I feel a little bit more strongly about this actually. Perhaps mentoring is not for everyone, but I think uh, males can benefit from having a close female friend to bounce back ideas from, to see views, to understand views, and to see different angles to things. Probably not in their line of work. They can be a completely external person to the whole idea, completely impervious, but at least it's a platform to discuss things or for things to be flagged. The person, the significant other in your life might not be the person about like to go about. Perhaps they may or you may or may not end up in fights because of that. So you might want to select someone else or select a completely like an outsider, an old high school friend even. But I think it would be a good idea to basically think about that idea and the possibility of having that. Another thing, you will end up finding yourself in situations and Okay. I will start with the most outrageous one, which I hope none of you will actually be doing, but uh, don't repeat the ingenious idea you have heard from a female colleague 5 seconds ago and present it at zero. So this is something that happens to women quite often, and it happens without even noticing it. I think we are now past beyond that generation. So with your generation, I don't think we are in that situation anymore. But I think you have a responsibility to be aware of that happening in your presence. And it's not about calling out another colleague about it. It's just, I think, taking action about it in one way or another. Once you realize something like that happening in your presence, being aware of it, being able to notice it happening, and then actually taking some sort of an action about it can be all that makes a big difference in terms of maintaining dynamics in a healthy way. So, this is all I want to say because, like, I don't have too much information on the male experience. I just wanted to not pass it by since we are underrepresented as women in STEM. Men are overrepresented, so it would have been kind of unfair not to say anything about it and pass along. So, this brings me to the end of my discussion. This is my favorite yeast cell, the budding yeast, and actually, it has a lot of fans, and they even made this nice little cartoon about it. So, this budding yeast has a very interesting life cycle, and it has sexes. You probably have not heard about it before anywhere else, but it has two mating times, A and alpha. It actually secretes the relevant factors, the pheromones, and it kind of has a very interesting life cycle where it goes through sexual and asexual reproduction at times, depending on the environmental conditions. And when they mate, they start by shooing. It's quite a nice little, nice little thing. Now, why do I present you this? So, when a Saccharomyces cerevisiae cell or a population actually is producing beer for you, leavening the dough, you never think of the population being A or alpha, right? You don't even think about that. It doesn't come into mind. So, which sex it belongs to is not important for actual task that they are executing or that they are doing. So, I think we can learn as human beings from this whole notion and start to think about isolating ourselves or like basically getting one step back and thinking about concepts in a way that would not hopefully in the future necessitate days like this to occur, because everything will be equal and we will be perhaps celebrating men in STEM and women in STEM, perhaps in separate days or in the same day without even having the necessity to basically move on with this. So this is where I would like to end. Thank you for your time.